You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody. Dave Roberts is back. He is, of course, the prolific explainer of the intersection of politics, policy, and climate. Please, please find his work on social media and on Substack. Find it and be part of that community, the Volts community. It is just really good, and it stays really good, like week in and week out. I've learned a ton from him. Dave, welcome back.
Thanks so much, Edwin.
Okay, so a week ago, you had a podcast on how climate is doing. And it began with, Dr. Sarah Kapnick telling us that rising temperatures are real, that they're being measured by instruments, across the planet and in satellites. And oh, gee whiz, that rapid rise in climate is caused by fossil fuel emissions. Enter Donald Trump. Right? This week, the president of the United States ended the fight against climate change, ordered the military to buy coal-powered electricity. I'm guessing you have some thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any particularly brilliant thoughts. What do you say? It's absurd. I mean, the reason I did a check-in on the science is like no scientist is questioning the things that Donald Trump is questioning. We're all past that. It's more interesting things in the science now, like the role of tipping points and all that kind of stuff. But I think everybody at this point has just sort of taken the U.S. off the board in their minds in this capacity, in this fight, and are just thinking about how to do it without us now. It's grim.
It's very grim, but I actually don't know if I want to talk about whether we get away with it or not in a minute. But before we get there, I watched some of to strike that. I went and looked at Fox to see what they said about it. And they're saying things like, I hope Donald Trump gets the credit he deserves for this. People aren't paying enough attention to this. Finally, I agree with them. People aren't paying enough attention to it. But they said, this is just so great because cars will cost less and they haven't. Is it possible that after all this time, they don't understand anything about climate change?
It's funny. I've bumped up against this many times in my career, Edwin. You won't be surprised, and it still amazes me. But like I was watching, for instance, a Fox segment the other day with Larry Kudlow. I don't know if you know who Larry Kudlow is.
I think I might have seen the same one.
He's one of these guys who's been on Fox for decades now. Who knows? Who knows why? Who knows what he originally did or whatever skill or knowledge he ever originally had? He's basically just a talking head. But he's been hosting a news show for literally decades and has done, I think, probably over those decades, probably dozens of segments that in one way or another touch on climate change. And he was talking about this on Fox, and he was talking about it in such a way that it made it very clear that he doesn't understand what it is, like at the very root of it. Like he doesn't understand the distinction between local particulate air pollution that damages your lungs when you breathe it and greenhouse gas emissions that are increasing the sort of radiative, power of the atmosphere, which is a whole separate thing. That is just core. You know what I mean? Like that's just what climate change is. The guy has been talking about it for decades, are like crapping on it, trying to, I guess, refute it. And he's just never bothered to do what would be 5 minutes of work, literally just reading the Wikipedia page on climate change. He hasn't even done that. And that's what gets me. That's what strikes me over and over again. Even if you view it as something of the enemy, even as you view it as something you need to fight against, even then, it seems like you would have just the curiosity, the human curiosity, to at least figure out what it is that you're saying is not happening. But they just don't care. I mean, that's it. That's it. He just doesn't care enough about this to even figure out what it is on like a high school, chemistry class level. And I don't know what to do about that. I don't know what to say to people like that. I don't know how they tick or why, but I think that is very reflective of the viewers of Fox. Like, this has been around for decades now. I mean, there are explainers about climate change thick on the ground. You can't throw a dead cat without hitting one on the internet. If you want the facts on this, they are everywhere. Easy to find. You barely have to lift a finger. They don't care to even know, to even learn what it is that they're saying is not happening.
Well, so I wonder if the part where you said it's been around for decades is working against us, because we have said this change in climate could cause enormous damage. Damage that'll affect humans, right? Damage to the food chain, damage to
is affecting humans,
right? But humans are also very adaptable, and we're getting around them. We're going to the movies. People are going out for Valentine's Day. You know what? They're kind of concerned about the troops in their streets, and the climate isn't really bothering most people every day. And I feel like this is sort of this excuse they're using is, oh, they told us it would be terrible. And look, there are more people on the planet than ever. We seem to be doing fine. I feel like I'm hearing Ruth Bader Ginsburg say, you guys are saying it's okay because you're standing an umbrella and it's dry, and now you're saying you don't need the umbrella.
Well, I don't even think that's quite right. They're not really under an umbrella. There are weather disasters happening in the United States that are hurting real people. Real people are getting displaced and hurt and killed. But these people don't care if a mother in a minivan gets shot in the face right in front of them. Why would they care about a poor person far away that they don't even know? These people just don't care. So it's not that they're okay. And that's the thing is like, I think we've discussed this before. Like a long time, I think a lot of people in the climate world had this idea that like if things got bad enough, obvious enough, that there would be some revelation, some sort of like eye-opening, like, I see, we've been wrong about this, you're right. But these people are not going to care. They're not going to care tomorrow. They're not going to care 10 years from now. Things can be falling around their ears and they will be thinking, how can I get mine? Do you know what I mean? Like you can't
there was a
force
revelation.
people to, you can't force people to care.
There was a revelation, I think. They decided that it isn't worth saving humanity, that they need their private islands, they need their private power, and the rest of it, and the idea that we're all in it together is too dangerous for them. That was their revelation.
Yeah, they don't want to live in a common rule-based society in which we all defer to one another, obey rules in the name of getting along with one another, in the name of mutual flourishing. They just don't like that. They don't like society. In climate, if you think about it, like it's hard to talk these people into sacrificing, even in the short term, for obvious benefits that are manifest to them in their community. If you think about climate, it's just that ask on a much larger, much more abstract level, like sacrifice for people 10 years from now, maybe across the world. Like these people, so like this is what governments are for. People have lives, they're busy, they don't necessarily have time in their day-to-day lives to think about 20 years from now, 30 years from now, whatever. This is literally what government is for. And what the right is trying to do is make government as reactive, minute to minute, as unable to plan, as unable to move in a coordinated fashion. They want that long term, they want that short term. So everything about climate, sacrificing for the long term, allowing an international rule-based order to govern your actions, all of it they hate. And if you ask them, like, well, what about the thing itself? What about the damage? What about the death? What about the death and damage that you are ensuring with your inaction. I just don't think they care. I've never, I've been at this for decades.
Yeah.
I've yet to get through. You know what I mean? So like,
Well,
you just government's got to do stuff, whether these people like it or not. That's just the way it is.
yeah, well, I think we will again. I think we'll throw them out, and I think we can use the threat that they will not be there forever to forestall much of the damage that Trump's declaration could
We'll
cause.
see. He's taken apart this is speaking of things that people aren't paying enough attention to. I mean, he is dismantling environmental regulation down to its like infrastructure, down to its fundamentals. So if we're gonna, if we're gonna come back at this, we're gonna be starting from scratch. Like we are gonna be starting a regulatory or legislative approach from scratch because he's taken everything apart that we've.
So you mean
far.
when Biden tried to make some regulatory changes and the court said, "Oh no, there's a major questions doctrine. You can't do that. Congress is required to make changes in regs like that." And now they're doing it willy-nilly, and we don't hear a peep from our courts. That's the world we're in, right?
I mean, I often say to people, like, I feel like the way the right is has kind of burst out into the open in the last few years in a way that a lot of people are kind of seeing it nakedly for the first time and grappling with it. But I always say, those of us in climate world, we are very familiar with these dynamics going way back. And there is no area of law in which conservatives are more obviously playing Calvin ball. If people get that reference, there's just no rules. They're just making it up as they go. They're just making it up as they go based on the outcomes they want. And that's true everywhere you look these days. All these legal arguments they're making these days have that feeling, but that started in climate. Like the way they've treated greenhouse gas regulations under the Clean Air Act is just so nakedly instrumental, and it's like they don't believe any of this stuff. They're just making up legal arguments on the fly because they know the Supreme Court's on their side and will accept whatever they say and will do whatever they want. So it's like the closer you look at climate law and at the legal arguments around climate regulations, the more sort of insane you go. And that major questions thing that you reference is one of the big ones. To this day, that is so what they just did, the big news, I guess, of the last couple of weeks is that Trump is trying to formally rescind the EPA's endangerment finding. So way back in 2007, there was a Supreme Court case about this, back when there was a sane majority on the Supreme Court. There's a court case about this, and the court said, yes, greenhouse gases count as pollutants under the Clean Air Act. And so that triggers a bunch of legal obligations. One, EPA has to determine whether they're dangerous to human health. And if it determines that they're dangerous to human health, it has to regulate them, stationary sources, i.e. power plants, and mobile sources, i.e. cars. And that's been happening. So all that comes out of the endangerment finding, which is where EPA did the science and said, yes, climate is dangerous. They are trying to now undo the endangerment finding. They can't do it on the basis of science. They tried. I don't know if you followed this little subplot, but they tried to sort of pull together a council of kind of crank old climate deniers and meet in secret to come up with something that they could show a court to try to show that climate isn't dangerous. And the whole thing was such a farce. It got called out by the court for meeting in secret, got disbanded. The whole thing was a farce. So they're not going after the science. Instead,
in climate, they can't. They certainly went after it in vaccines.
Sure. But the climate science, I think, has such a rich record now at this point that they just clown themselves when they try to go after this. So now it's all based on this major questions thing, which is they're saying if Congress had meant to regulate greenhouse gases, they would have said so. And this is, if you understand the Clean Air Act, will make you dizzy when you hear that, because the whole effing point of the Clean Air Act, the fundamental structure of the Clean Air Act, is to say anything that is harmful to human beings in the air, we're going to regulate that to safe levels. They deliberately said in the law, we don't yet know everything in the air that might harm humans. Therefore, we're going to have this process every so often. EPA is going to meet and review the latest science, and we're going to stay current on the latest science on pollutants. The law was specifically designed so that new science could come along, new pollutants could be discovered, and would be regulated under the law. That is the nature of the law. And now they're using that very nature of the law to refute it. And it's like any judge who's been involved in these cases for decades is just gobsmacked at this, laughing at this in its face, and yet it is cruising right to the Supreme Court, and it's going to cruise right through.
Well, maybe. I mean, the litigation is going to be fierce on this.
Yes.
And, states are going to do their own thing, some of them. And I'm sure that the administration is going to try and say it's illegal for states to have emission standards that relate to greenhouse gases.
Well, this is what's interesting. I mean, I don't know how deep people want to get into this, but if you part of, there's been a lot of lawsuits about climate change because there's tangible damages now, and there are sort of like people you can identify who did the emitting. So there's a lot of lawsuits, and all those lawsuits in the U.S. thus far have been mooted. Why? Because the courts say EPA is regulating greenhouse gases. We can't sue people who are following the law. But if EPA is no longer regulating greenhouse gases, then all those lawsuits are back on the table. All those personal lawsuits about climate damages are back. It's going to be chaos. It's going to be madness. They are opening up a Pandora's box of madness with this ruling.
Yeah. Well, they are opening up. Yeah, they are.
I mean, they're opening, that's what they do. They open 20 Pandora's boxes. You can handle maybe one of them. You can even grapple intellectually with one or two of them. And then that's 18 horrible things going on that you don't even have time to track, much less fight.
Here, maybe this is a saying all over the country, but here in Chicago, particularly around politics, we have a saying that pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. And, right? And these guys are hogs. They have just said everything is ours. And after they lose, I expect the next Congress to look at who they are here and not allow the quick revision of history to say, oh, this was Donald Trump and we didn't know anything about it. And I expect, I expect us to say 0 subsidies for fossil fuels anymore. Carbon tax, you bet. Oil industry, you wanted to take our democracy down and the planet with you? Sorry, buddies, you're on your own.
I mean, I would love to think that, but, I remember very viscerally living through 8 years of George W. Bush, doing comically malign things, one after the other, all the greatest hits we all remember, the Iraq War, Katrina, et cetera. But what people don't remember, to get back to this point about the flurry of activity that's hard to track, people have forgotten. People remember the A tier George W. Bush scandals. There were so many B and C and D tier scandals that have just been lost to history now. And I remember living through all that and thinking, by the end of his second term, I remember thinking distinctly, this is going to discredit the Republican Party for a generation. They are going to have to go into the wilderness and apologize and reform and rethink. There's no way they're going to recover from this absolute fiasco of incompetence and malignant, corruption. This is going to be world ending for them. This is going to change U.S. politics. And Edwin, they were back in the saddle within months.
Yeah, I don't want to pick
It
too
did
much
not last for weeks.
I agree with you. Look, I don't want to.
Why wouldn't that happen again? Why don't we think that's going to happen again?
Well, I don't want to pick too much on Barack because I can't for a minute imagine the additional burdens of being the first black president in America. But it is going to be required of whoever wins on our side that they spend every single day focusing on making America better, but telling everybody why this crowd made it worse. I mean, when the Republicans were banished to the wilderness for 60 years, it was because FDR. I mean, Herbert Hoover wasn't a terrible man, but FDR made a point of making sure everybody understood those camps should be called Hoovervilles, and and went after the Republicans for their ties to big business that hurt ordinary Americans. And we have to do that again. The last couple Democratic regimes we're not ready to do that, and maybe the time wouldn't have allowed it, but we're there now.
I think you are reflecting a large swath of the Democratic base, a large swath of Democrats on the ground feel this way for sure.
Yep.
But I think we need to think about who runs things around here, the elites who control our institutions, our media, our politics. And one of the things I think about a lot is Donald Trump won the presidential election in 2024 by a squeaker. It was so close, barely won. And the elites of this country were like, welp, guess woke is over and we're all fascists now. Yep, let's do this. Like, they didn't hesitate. They were so ready. They were ready to jump on the fascism train. They were eager. They're like, oh, thank God. That pressure to be good, to be better, to try to care. Thank God that's gone and we can all just be a-holes and say the word retard out loud now. Woohoo! They were so ready. They were ready for fascism. They were ready to call the game over after that battle. And those same elites are still there. They still hate
us.
An undergrad. They still hate an undergrad, a pro-Palestinian activist more than they hate any MAGA person, more than they hate any ICE officer. Like, they still hate the Democratic base, hate and fear the Democratic base more than they fear the other side. Those people are still there. They still run things. So where is this energy for like a purge
I'm telling you,
going to come from?
It's coming. Those elites are losing that control. Anymore, you think of Davos and you think of the Epstein crowd, now that we understand what that is, as the same crowd, right? And powerful people doing terrible things to people and protecting themselves. And
look at how other countries are handling that. I think it's so instructive. Look at what's happening in other countries. People are getting run out on the rails. They're getting thrown in jail. They're getting purged from polite society. And I heard from someone just the other day that they were talking privately to a prominent U.S. political journalist at a prominent U.S. political outlet who was telling them that they think Epstein is already overcovered in the U.S. and they're bored and tired with it and they want to move on. That's the U.S. That's U.S. elites.
Well,
they are the Epstein people. Like, why would we expect them to purge the Epstein class? They are that. Who is going to do the things that you want to happen, I guess?
I'm going to tell you, this is one of my favorite questions, because it isn't the elites. It has always been ordinary Americans. And I looked at what happened in Chicago when I showed up here, and the lessons we learned, and what folks in Minneapolis learned from us and then improved upon and did themselves. Ordinary Americans are going to say, this crowd, as they did, elites ran things in the 1890s, they ran things in the 1920s, and ordinary Americans had enough and said, no, not happening anymore. And we are at that point where the elites have run their time out. They have proven to be morally bankrupt and unfit for leadership in a democracy. I mean, God bless Harvard, the most elite of elite, is at least standing its ground. But
I would just ask you, though, a lot of things have changed since those previous episodes, most notably media and screens and the information environment and everything else. And people are not accustomed to getting off their computers and out into the streets anymore. And on the computers, these malign elites run the platforms on which we communicate with one another. They run the public internet. They run the AI. They run everything. Like, how are we going to, how do you get around them at this point? Their control over our communication is so total.
But there was polling this last week that said, the casual news consumers. Remember when Trump won, there was this fabulous study that said the less you know about the news, the more you're likely to support.
The most important graph to come out of that election, understanding that is the core of everything. The less you know, the more likely you are to vote for Trump. That is a mathematical correlation.
It's not true anymore. There's new polling that says those guys have turned on him.
Yeah. I wonder, like, you and I have normal, I guess, what I think of as normal media habits, i.e., like, we read the Times, whatever. Like,
I do not have a normal media habit. I
whatever mainstream
news.
Like, how do those people that we're talking about, those not quite connected, don't quite know what's going on people, somehow they were turned for Trump, and now somehow they've been turned against him. But, like, do you understand that process? I don't. Who are they listening to?
They heard Trump say, "I'm going to make life more affordable," and then when life wasn't more affordable, they heard him say it was a hoax.
I don't even know if they. I don't. That ascribes a level of that ascribes an accurate understanding of events.
Well, people understand their own reality.
I'm skeptical of whether they do or not.
They know groceries are more expensive.
I really think, and this might be a slight bit of naivete and hope on my part, but I want to think that the sight of masked government agents in the streets terrorizing ordinary people has triggered something in the American character that has been quiet for a good while, which is like,
we don't like being pushed around.
Tread on me, right? Yeah. That got stirred up. But again, that was 100% grassroots run, grassroots organized, grassroots everything. How do you scale it and make it enduring without some help from elites and elite institutions? Like, that's what I see over and over again. This whole century is the people of the Democratic Party being failed by the leadership of the party and of prominent social institutions over and over again. And I just why wouldn't that happen again?
Too much. But right now, the people of the Democratic Party, and by the way, people of them, it isn't Democrat versus Republican anymore, because that Republican Party's gone. It's America versus MAGA, and the people are pushing their members of Congress, particularly the Democrats, to have a backbone for a change, and they're showing it. Dave, I think this is a real moment, and I think whatever your news consumption habits, everybody in America is as smart as everybody else. When they get information, they kind of think about it. They look at their lives. They look at, if you, God almighty, can you imagine being a farmer? Can you imagine like the life in rural America where your school's closing, your hospital's closing, and the markets for your grains have closed? They can't possibly be saying that's the fault of a lefty in Chicago.
I don't know. Everything that's happened in the last several decades in the U.S. rests on widespread ignorance and delusion among the population.
I know, and they want to keep us that way.
It would be odd if all of a sudden the public were well informed all of a sudden and were making rational judgments all of a sudden. I just think their turn. I mean, this is like maybe a dark thing to say, but like, I think you really have to take public ignorance. Like, if you look at the polls, if you look at surveys, people have lives. They just don't have time to learn about politics. They don't know much. So I think like they probably were for Trump for reasons that are so kind of wacky and random that we can't even really guess or anticipate them. I think they probably have turned against Trump for equally sort of arbitrary and random and like media related reasons. Like, I don't trust.
I don't care what their reasons are. I'm happy to stand with them.
I don't trust whether it's enduring, I guess. I don't trust whether it's
but
going
it's
to
got to be
stick.
terrifying to the elites. So we want to start saying to the elites, do you know what happens when the hoi polloi are going to, when we take
that's
over?
what we need. That's what
When we
need.
take over, we're tearing it all down. And if you care about your stuff at all, you better switch sides today.
And if you look back at American history, at the peaks of progress, the peaks of progressive action, the kind of things that we all now look back on and say, isn't that great that we did that? The only reason America ever does anything like that is when elites are scared that the whole thing's going to fall apart under them if they don't do it. That's what happened in the 30s.
They should be scared. Let me ask you about Seattle.
I wonder.
Is there anything going on there that you live there? Are the people who work at Amazon and Starbucks and Microsoft, are the employees like banging the drums to say to their owners, what the hell are you doing?
Well, I mean, the main thing in Seattle is we had 1 million people downtown a couple of days ago.
Yeah,
that was to celebrate the Super Bowl, though not.
I know.
That wasn't it. Although,
by the way, congratulations! It was a great team.
There were numerous ice out chants throughout that event. Needless to say, but I think like I'll just say here, like the people. The sort of demographic in the U.S. politics that gets the least attention and the least love, but is the most important to this country's ongoing health is just your basic resistance mom, your basic like suburban mom who like doesn't want to get on social media and show her tail feathers and argue with all the other dicks on social media, is just like living her life, but sees cruelty and abuse and instinctively hates it and goes out onto the street to do something about it. It's those people who we never see profiles of, right? CNN never sends reporters out to like, let's go to the yoga studio in the suburb and talk to the moms. It's always the rural diner, but like it's these basic just ordinary people who are doing this, who are the heroes in all of this. I would like to see a politics that properly demonizes elites. Like I want to see some real populism. Like this idea that the elites are the HR department that doesn't want you to say retard, that's the elite you're fighting is so deranged. I would like to see some real populism where we're fighting the people who are really got their boots on our necks, i.e. the rich people and the powerful people. I would like to see some real, and I would like to see a politics that centers and celebrates ordinary moms, resistance moms. Let's put them at the center. Let's give them some flowers.
And their decency.
Profiles of them. By the way, they are more decent and more pleasant to talk to than any one of like 1,000 political pundits you could choose.
I mean, one of them was named Renee Good.
Yes, right? Precisely.
And they shot her. So for saying her last words, I'm not mad at you, dude, and they shot her.
Yes, it is. I mean, it is. Like Bad Bunny says, it is love versus hate in about as stark a way as you're ever going to encounter in public life. Like this, there is, we libs, we love nuance. We're in love with our own nuance. We caress our own nuance.
Yeah, it's time just to pick a fight.
And tell oats
to pick a fight.
This is clear. This is love versus hate.
Right.
And it's time to choose a side. And I'm so sick of hearing U.S. elites, comfortable, wealthy people who are saying like, both sides are blah, blah. We need to move on beyond the partisanship. I'm so tired of that.
As long as they're on the side of hate, they're going down with everybody else.
Choose a side. There is no both sides to this anymore.
I totally agree. It's not Democrats and Republicans for sure.
Suburban moms
it's just
in
us
the
and
face
them.
or not. Like,
I couldn't agree with you more. Hey, by the way, did you ever read the book Ministry of the Future?
I read parts of it. I couldn't get through the whole thing. I mean, too much of that book was like a series of white papers about climate change that I've already read.
That you've already read. Okay.
I already know all that stuff. It's the first chapter of that book, though, is that right? Sticks with you.
It does stick with you. And I thought about the first chapter when you were talking about it's good versus evil, because it brings us all the way back to the beginning. If these guys get what they want, that first chapter turns into our life.
Yes. And that's the thing, is like, if your mindset is zero sum, which I think is the characteristic quality of MAGA, the characteristic quality of authoritarian personality, the authoritarian personality, reactionary politics, is just that you think everybody's out for themselves, like you are, right? You are out for yourself, and you think everybody else is too. Like, those people, nothing's ever going to push them into cooperative action on climate change. Like, you can just raise walls, even if climate change gets really bad and like migration gets really bad and like we have to abandon certain coastal cities, none of that's going to shake them into being good, cooperative, positive sum people. If you want any of modern problems solved, you need to elect decent people who care about other people and who respect the rule of law and who know how to build enduring institutions. That is the opposite of everything MAGA right now. Just literally the opposite.
All right, let me ask you a question about markets in a way that's sort of not in politics. The insatiable appetite of AI is at the moment like sucking up energy like crazy. You can't get, apparently intelligence is directly related to power in the AI world, right? You need, if you're going to be smarter, you need more power.
That's what they think now. We should at least put a pin in here and say it's still possible that developments in chip technology
well, that's where I'm going.
Could break that relationship somehow. We don't necessarily know.
Because they aren't going to be able to get, the power is generating heat, it's going to melt it down. They aren't able to, they sort of reached a limit. And maybe they're going to develop chips that don't give off heat, that are much more efficient. Their greed might help us solve some of these really big problems.
Well, I would say, there's a lot to say about the AI thing. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
And all I would say to my liberal brethren is just like, I'm on Blue Sky, and the Blue Sky crowd has decided AI's evil. It's the bad guy, top to bottom.
I'm not Blue Sky.
Nothing worth discussing. End of story. I just think it's too early. Like,
I agree. I'm not.
We don't know what this is yet. We don't know what it could do. We don't know what's going to happen. Just leave a little negative space in your heart to learn and be open to events. That's all I would say. But the one thing I would say is the one positive aspect of AI is that it is forcing conversations around energy that needed to happen anyway. Like, we needed to electrify anyway. We needed lots more power anyway. We needed to spend on infrastructure anyway. They are coming along with giant bags of money. And that's how you make things happen in the U.S. is bringing giant bags of money. So they're making things happen that need to happen.
Well, that's a more positive place to end. But look, I agree with you. And this whole conversation's been fabulous, Dave. And it's not for those of you who don't know Dave Roberts' work, he's telling you everything you would ever want to know about climate and how we're thinking about it and how it intersects with politics. This conversation focused mostly on the politics.
It's hard not to, it's hard to turn away these days.
Yeah. I'm really grateful for your work and for your time. I enjoyed this conversation a lot.
Thanks a lot, Edwin. Appreciate it.